Welcome back to Led from Within. Well, I shouldn't say that. I should say welcome to Led from Within. Okay, so today I want to talk about something. Prior to today, the podcast was called Co-Parenting with Confidence. And today it becomes Led from Within. And not because the work around relationships and parenting no longer matters. Absolutely not. It's because the conversations have been evolving. And this podcast and the work that I want to put out in the world needs to evolve as well. And so, what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about why the change, why now, and also what you can expect. Because for those of you who have been listening for a long time, I want you to know that I am so, so grateful for you having been here and being here. And I trust and hope that this next conversation is actually going to serve you more. And so I hope that you will stay with me and continue to learn and grow and communicate and allow us to have these conversations here on this podcast because I always look so forward to talking with you. And when I get to meet you on Zooms or in real life, it's just such a pleasure to see other like-minded women and men out there really doing the work. And so I'm so grateful that you've been doing that. And I hope that this podcast, now being led from within, offers even more, right? More perspective, more inspiration, more knowledge, more skills, more evolution. So why now, right? There was a pattern that I kept seeing. So through my work as a co-parenting coach and a somatic coach and relationship coach, the challenges that I see that women were bringing to me weren't really about co-parenting. Co-parenting is just the place where everything kind of really fell apart. And so that felt like, okay, if I can fix this, right, then everything else is going to be easier. Totally natural, right? But there was a pattern that I kept seeing through the women that I was working with, whether they were navigating divorce, considering divorce, major life transitions. The stories often sound similar, right? Because we're more similar than we are different, all of us as humans. But, it was the affair happened, or the betrayal happened, or I just can't live this way one more second. Or there was a rupture that sort of blew everything up as they knew it. And oftentimes we call this a midlife crisis, right? And people normalize, joke about it. There's movies and shows about it. But it's anything but funny, right? Because there is collateral damage that happens when we are in crisis and make giant changes. So I would ask things like, well, how did you resolve conflict, in your marriage or in the relationship? How did you communicate your needs? What did repair look like when something was ruptured in the relationship? What boundaries did you have? And often the response that I was met with was silence or a complete blank stare, or someone saying, well, we didn't talk about those things, or we, I just avoided the conflict, or we never fought. I didn't see this coming, or it was really hard. No one, would back me up, or that wasn't something that I was allowed to ask for, or that's just the way that we were, right? That's the way that we agreed things would go. And I realized something really important in that the issue was not co-parenting. The issue was that many of us have never learned how to live honestly inside of relationships. And here's the second component, because it's not just about that, right? It's not just about the relationships. Then bring midlife in, right? And here is where I, just like you, if you're listening, am navigating this midlife journey. But for many people, midlife is the period of time when the cost of silence kind of comes due, right? Maybe we've built our life based on things that made sense when we were 25, 30 years old, right? We had expectations. roles, responsibilities. We became wives and mothers and caregivers and peacekeepers. And we certainly carried the emotional weight, right, of keeping everything stable, of keeping everybody else happy, of keeping things quiet and calm. And for a really long time, we were able to hold that structure together. But eventually the weight becomes too heavy, right? And this is what we often call a midlife crisis. But I don't think that a midlife crisis, is a sudden explosion. It's actually a million tiny little micro misalignments that have built up over years, right? It's the marriage that didn't evolve. It's the boundaries that weren't set. It's the needs that weren't communicated. It's the roles that didn't evolve. It's the expectations that were there but weren't being met, right? Or didn't evolve or change or were never spoken about. And eventually we cannot continue to hold on, and it's too much and something breaks. And so this is the part where I really got fascinated, because midlife isn't just a breaking point, right? It's kind of an opening. And so many of us are going through it. And I certainly, my friend groups, right, we're all going through it. And I noticed in my own life, I did not have the bandwidth to maintain the relationships that I had. It's like all of the sudden there was so much anger and so much rage that I couldn't fit it in the closet I was trying to stuff it in, that I had stuffed it in for so long. It's like those cupboards and closets inside my mind were just filled to the brim, and there was no more room, and I couldn't shove it away anymore. And this is what I'm seeing in the women around me that I'm talking with, right? And midlife kind of brings us to that point where we just simply cannot tolerate the BS anymore, right? And so it doesn't have to be a crisis. And that's what really got me fascinated and having this conversation with other people and within my own life and research and study, because midlife is also an opening. It's when something is shifting within us biologically, emotionally, spiritually. It is meant to happen, right? We are in a massive life transition, and the tolerance of pretending disappears, right? And the questions get louder and louder and louder. Those questions like, who am I? What do I actually believe here, right? Whose life am I living? And the women that I was talking to realized something really startling, that they have spent years building a life that they didn't consciously choose. It's like one that just happened. And I know I can relate to that so much. Maybe they did choose it at one point. Certainly we did, right? But didn't stop to ask along the way, does this still fit? Does this still work? Is this still aligned for where I want to go? And midlife offers us the opportunity to do just that, to pause, to question, and to realign. And that's why this podcast is evolving as well. Because when I work with women, we're actually not doing co-parenting skills or relationship work necessarily. We're working on something much, much deeper. We're working on building up the capacity to be able to live an honest life, learning how to set boundaries, right? That aren't these rigid, uh, these rigid fences that keep people out, but boundaries are actually supposed to keep us inside of our life, living a full life, and learning how to set those boundaries. It's learning how to regulate our nervous system so that we can come from a place of regulation and not reactivity. It's learning how to tell the truth, right? To be able to hear our own truth and then speak it out loud. And it looks like learning how to build relationships that are actually mutual and healthy. And these aren't parenting skills. These are life skills, right? And they change everything. And so I want this podcast now to be a place for real conversation, not hype, not platitudes, not someone telling you you're perfect exactly the way you are, which by the way you are, which is true, right? But this is meant to be a mirror, a place where you can honestly come and look at your life and ask, where you can come and honestly take a look at your life and ask the question, what's working? What isn't working? What do I actually believe? Right? Are the values that I'm espousing actually the ones that I want to be living in now? And each episode is meant to offer you perspective shifts and tools and questions so that you can begin living those answers out loud. And certainly we want to do this so that we can live richer, more honest, more clear, defined lives. But also, it's really important that we start to model what midlife looks like for our families, for our children, for our friends, and the people around us. Because the paradigm and the idea of this sort of like midlife, you're getting over the hill, everything's done, you're in the second half, sort of the closing chapters, is anything but true. Women in midlife are vibrant and passionate and full of joy and life. And life can be, this moment of life can be the richest, most fun, most passionate, most joyful period. And what better way to engage with the people and the world around us than coming from that beautiful love and energy. And that's what midlife offers us when we're willing to shed all of the preconceived notions, all of the old roles and the rules and the identities that don't work for us anymore. And I'm not saying you get rid of everything, but I'm saying you get to try things on. You get to decide what works for me now and what doesn't, and then start to live into that. Because imagine the world if we were able to really start to shape and shift with clarity and with courage and with truth and with passion, right? That will ripple out. And one thing I've also noticed in my own life and definitely with my clients is, you know, a lot of us are also in midlife parenting teenagers, and teenagers get this, it's their period in life where they get to, um, they're really stepping into identity and figuring out who they are and where they fit in the world. And there's a similarity with midlife as well during this period because we too get to start to shift and change. What are the identity? Who am I? Where do I fit in? Where do I want to fit in? And when we can actually start to model how to do that in a healthy, beautiful, grounded, regulated, responsive way, we mirror that to the children that we're raising. We mirror that to the partner who's also going through their own changes. We mirror that to all the people and the friends around us. And I'm not saying that you're responsible for everyone, but I am saying you're responsible for how you show up in the world. And so this podcast is really meant to be a space where we can have those conversations because midlife does not have to be a crisis. It can be a recalibration. It can be a moment in time when we just flat out refuse to outsource our authority one more day, where we refuse to live on autopilot one more day, where we refuse to live Groundhog Day over and over in the same patterns that don't work for us. And that's what this podcast is all about, a space where we can have honest, courageous conversations about where we are and how we want to move forward. So welcome to Led from Within, and I look forward to the journey with you.